Alright, so to pick up on rigging, alright, we are going to start. Oh, I realize I'm losing, or I lost a null in here and here. Alright, so this is how we had this set up to have all these nulls which are control points. So everything should be kind of having this blue box if you're checking to make sure that things are as graphics or movie clips. I think will work also. They should not be drawing objects though. That will not work for the bone tool. So you would want to go through and just as a double check, just make sure everything is a graphic. I feel pretty confident that mine are. They can be named if they're not the end of the world. Alright, is that my null I was looking for before? There it was. Alright, so I'm just gonna... Alright, so to rig this is to apply the bone tool. Alright, so I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna start down from the bottom. I'm gonna go up to the hip area, and I should recognize this other null in here, which it did. That's going to act as our pivoting point for our legs. From the hips, we're going to go right up to the torso area. Always trying to go kind of to the edge of the object so that that becomes a pivot point. All right, and then up to our null here. We can adjust these points afterwards, but I always like to try to get them kind of right on the edge so that your objects will hinge or pivot from those points, and then up to our top null. Alright, so starting here, and just to kind of test, we can see everything kind of moves together. Alright, so that's a good start. We are then going to move, or I'm going to move on to the arms. You can kind of move this stuff back into place for alignment. We're going to talk about constraints and things soon. Alright, so I'm just going to go then for my arms. I'm going to start at this null and go to my upper arm, upper to lower, lower to hand, and then hand to null. Same thing on the other side. Null to upper arm, upper to lower, lower to hand, hand to null. And then for the legs, I'm going to go null to upper leg, upper to lower, lower to foot, foot to null. Same thing on the other side. Alright, so now we have this puppet, if you will, that we can control using these things. Alright, so now that would not be correct. Our arm should not be moving out of that socket there. So here's where getting into talking about our constraints and rotation control I think is important. So this one being the most important one I think for that. So if we click on this joint, and it should kind of highlight in blue showing all directions, because you can just click on an axis and I think do some control on there. Now I kind of messed myself up, I think. Let's see if I can get back to that. There we go. So with that selected, I want to disable joint rotation. So what that's saying is that in here, these arms or these lines are not going to move at all. And so that's good. Alright, so now my arm, well, not totally good, the way as you can see my artwork here, but this line is not moving. So to fix this though, so that the arm kind of moves in place a little better, now I can use the transform tool. So coming over to here, I'm going to have this kind of moving out of place, but now I can reposition and I can move my pivot point so that now that's at that point. And now if I move it, see that that little joint moved, and now that's moving from the right place. Ideally, I would have drawn this shape with a little bit of a curvature on the end so that when it moves I don't have that empty space, but I think this will be fine. Alright, so I might want to go back and, you know, it's kind of a good idea. You can examine your your objects as far as where their pivot points are. So like this one, actually that's okay right in the middle there. The hand, maybe I would just move back a little bit from there. Kind of go over here, I can see that that should kind of be there where this line intersects that. Alright. We can look at this one, that's probably not too bad. I am just going to realign this up to here. So even though I'm moving the parts, it's still maintaining that connection with the bone tool. Alright, so now I think I have that pretty well squared away where I can click and these will drag on. That moves okay. I think I'm going to fix this one in here. I don't like the way that's moving so much. So yeah, that moves a little bit better. See how our legs go. Alright, so we're going to start doing a little more constraints in here. This one's going to be a little tough. Alright, that's kind of good. Alright, so I think I recommend doing the same thing with this joint down here, disabling that rotation so that these lines won't move. So now when we move the leg, yeah, it's just going to kind of stay in place a little better. But now we have some weird things happening with the knees and the feet. So what we're recommending for these is not disabling the rotation, but constraining it. So if we have 45 degrees on either side, now it can't quite go as far. Alright, so I'm going to kind of do that to all these joints down here. I'm just going to constrain them, and then just constrain this one. So now, I can't go quite as far, but what's going on down there with that? Ooh. That got crazy. Alright, so I can play around with that. But the next part of this, once you get all that kind of worked out, to make our actual animation, all we're going to do is go pick a point, maybe a half a second, which would be like 15 frames. We can say insert pose, and then just come into here and move our part. So we can kind of do something like that. And now we can see that it has filled in those spaces in between. And you can pick any point in here and you can kind of just reposition, and it does make a new keyframe or pose and fills in the gaps in between. So that would be creating some animation to your character. And you could always add additional poses and kind of extend your timeline there. Alright, and then finally we're going to talk about cameras. Alright, so to create some overall rotation or zooming, we can click on the camera. That makes a layer for us. And then all we have to do is put in a keyframe at any point, which would indicate a kind of a point of change. So I have this. It's moved us to that point. So at this point, if I wanted to zoom in, I can just use my zoom. So it's saying we're going to go from there to there. That's a quick jump. So to have the software fill in the gaps, we're just going to right click a frame in between and say create classic tween. So now it's gradually coming in. We can do the same thing with rotation. So we can insert a keyframe, switch this to rotation, maybe go to the left here, and then at the end insert another keyframe and go to the right. So we have these jumps, which then we just need to fill in or tween them using the classic tween. And so there you go. So now it's rotating and zooming.